We'll be starting up here in about 30 seconds. We're going to let folks sign in. I'm just letting a few more folks sign in, Marty, and then we'll start right up here in just another 15 seconds or so.
Okay.
Okay, it looks pretty stable, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is David Orr. I'm the director here at the New York State LTAP Center, the Cornell Local Roads program, and I want to welcome you to our Y webinar on departmental duties. Our speaker today is going to be Marty Roberts, who is with the town of Reading for how many years, Marty?
38 years and 10 months.
In 10 months. And how many of those were you the superintendent?
The last 15 years I was a superintendent.
Missed a meeting, they got you elected, and then you were there for 15 years more. Okay.
Something like that.
Something like that. So we're going to be using the poll EV that we've been using for these webinars. So you would go to pollev.com/CLRP for NYSLTAP, and that will show up in your chat pod. Now, the chat pod is not going to be available for typing things in, but you should open that up. It's at the bottom of your screen, so you can get things like the links to our Running Your Highway Department workbook manual and a copy of a 284 agreement, which is required for towns, and it's still useful for everybody to have some kind of agreement with your board. Any other links we'll put there. If you have a question, please put them in the Q&A, and that's also available by going down to the bottom of your screen. Okay, so with that, Marty, I'm gonna go dark myself and go silent, and I'll let you get going. I'll step in if there's any questions that people have, but otherwise, go for it.
Good morning, Dave. Good morning. Thank you, David, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking this hour out of your day to spend it with me. Hopefully you didn't get large amounts of snow wherever you're at, and hopefully everybody's staying warm and safe out there. Today's presentation, this webinar is primarily geared to people that haven't done this before, but not necessarily. I mean, if it's something that you're thinking about in the future, you know, it probably is not a bad idea to give some thought to what really your department's responsibilities are. As David spoke to you about, the bar at the end of the bottom of the page will tell you what you do. Primarily, it looks like the good share of you are either town or county people. There are some cities, and there is some state and federal people here, and a few privates. That's great. Apparently, I'm glad to see that not everybody works just for the weekend, although sometimes that was what I used to do as well. It's you go ahead and weigh in. That's great. What is your job? What exactly do you do when you work for the town or the county or any of those? I always ask these same questions when I teach in person at one of the workshops. It helps me kind of gear myself to who I'm speaking to. You know, it helps me understand. It looks like the vast majority of them are highway superintendents, DPW commissioners, and that's great. That's exactly who I tend to gear my presentation to. Although we've had board members that want to make sure that they're they understand exactly what the department is responsible for and what their responsibilities are, and help them making that all successful. So how long have you been in your current position? And this is the one that probably I am most interested in. I mean, I want to know how many of these guys are just getting started at this. I mean, this is the big thing. I mean, we've gone through an election cycle, albeit it's not normal election cycle. Normally it's every other year, but it looks like there's a good number of you that are newbies as well, and that's important because this webinar today won't keep you from making mistakes, but it might help. I would encourage you to attend one of the workshops, one of my workshops, but especially the rest of them as well. They'll make you smarter people, and smarter people are better. A good number of you have been there for 5 to 10 years, and that's great. I'm glad to see you. They're still trying to get smarter. It's better. Well, it's a good thing. And here's the map of New York. Where are you from? I'm thinking there's probably gonna, oh, look, there's some people out in the western section in the snow belt. That's a good thing look at that. There are a number of people that are where it really isn't necessary. Oh, somebody's in the lake, though. I can see that one. Number of downstate people. Great. I really like to see that as well.
Looks like the folks in the Lake Effect band aren't with us this morning.
I was figuring that might be part of it. I was really hoping that it wouldn't keep them away, but I saw Pat Mahar from the town of Denmark posted that they were helping a neighboring town because things were so bad there. So I assumed that it was, we probably lose a few people because of that. So what are some of your departmental responsibilities? I mean, everybody knows they have things that they're responsible for, but what are your thoughts as to what you're responsible for? Maintenance, yeah, for sure. I like to see that safety, or type that in there, good for you. Management, construction, roads, yes. Mm-hmm. Everything. Yeah, there you go. Sanitation, fleet water. I see that. Yep. So depending on where you're from, you may be responsible for a lot of different things that some people in other parts of the state may not. A number of years ago when I was on the town superintendent's executive committee, we went to Shelter Island, and Shelter Island has a navigational aid. They're responsible for the navigational aids in the areas surrounding the island. It's not something that you would expect that they'd be responsible for, but it was something that I took quite notice of. I thought, well, wow, that's amazing. They had buoy tenders that they had to make sure that the markers were they were supposed to be. Yeah, inspections, yes. Yeah, there are a number of things that everybody is responsible for, and that's the important thing that you're aware of it. Did you say something, David?
I was just saying, Shelter Island is one of 2 towns that are surrounded by water.
There's another one. Where's the other one?
Grand Island over in.
And I've been there too, yes. But the only difference with Grand Island is you can drive to it. Shelter Island, you have to go by ferry. That's the only, and when they pave there, they have to send the asphalt over in a truck on a on a ferry to get there. Back then it was $90 a load just for the ferry trip over, 90 on the ferry trip back. So you have to add that to the cost of what your road projects cost as well. The one thing that I really don't see here is I don't really see. No, I don't see that. No, we'll get to it, I guess, if we don't see it there. So anyway, so your responsibilities are as payrolls and vouchers obviously are one of your responsibility. You may have a clerk that takes care of your vouchers, but you ultimately are the one that's going to sign off for them because you're the one that's responsibility. It's your responsibility to know that to tell people that the goods and services provided on that voucher were indeed true and accurate. Payroll, you may have a time clock. You may keep track of the hours on your own. And up until the start of this what's happened in the last couple of years, I mean, I think they were paying people that weren't at there, but I think there had to be some sort of a resolution by the town or the state, some sort of grant by the state to allow them to do that. Because if I were to sign a payroll and people weren't there, hadn't indeed put those hours in, it would have been on me. So, and I still believe it's true. I think there may have been some sort of a waiver because of the pandemic. Highway right of way. You're absolutely responsible for everything in that right of way. It's a bone of contention as to what your right of way is. I mean, if you're somewhere where there's deeded roads, then you're responsible for what that deed and that easement details. Everywhere else is pretty much what you use. So there'll be people that'll tell you that that you only have to the edge of the road, and just maintain your right of way. As long as you keep it maintained and to the distance that you traditionally used, it'll probably hold up in court, probably. Now with everybody loves their trees, but now that they're dying, trees that are probably out of the traditional right of way are now going to be your responsibility. So I'm not sure how that will end up ultimately, but try to maintain your right of way, and you won't end up being dragged in. I mean, you may still be dragged into court, but at least you'll have something to stand on. Notice. You're responsible for prior notices, things that people, if they email you, if they send you a letter, calls never in the past have been really considered prior notice. And the prior notice law in New York State is pretty clear, but if you haven't passed a resolution on the local level to enhance that, I would really suggest that you do that. Prior notice gives you some protection for defects. So let's say a pipe collapses and you didn't realize the pipe had collapsed and somebody drives into it. If there had been no prior notice of that defect, then you kind of would be off the hook for any damage you may have caused to a car. There are some exceptions if law enforcement makes you aware of something, or if it's something that's so blatantly obvious that it's been there forever and somebody ends up wrecking in that kind of thing, you may still be on the hook for that. Records, make sure that you keep them. Keep them, do them well. It's, you won't remember 6 months from now what you did today. So I would, if it's something that stands out, something that you think is critical, make sure you document it. If you notice something when you're doing your road inspections and you notice a defect, make sure you document it and make sure you have a course of action as to how to eliminate that defect, or at least make people aware until it can be minimized. If you're starting as a superintendent now, I mean, I see there were some people that have been here less than a year, according to New York State retirement law. You're going to have to keep records of how many hours you spend in your position for the first 90 days of your new year. Make sure that you do that. You have to record those with the town clerk. That way, in the future, they'll give you credit for the entire year that you work, as long as you're working whatever the state considers a minimum number of hours. And I'm not really sure if I know what that number is, but I don't really think anybody that's in the superintendent's position for the first 90 days in the wintertime is going to have any trouble making their 40 hours. And if they do, then they must be living someplace that I don't really know about in this state. Restricting and closing roads, make sure that you understand, and just one more thing about records, make sure you understand exactly how long you have to retain those records for. Some have to be kept indefinitely. Employee records have to be kept indefinitely, so that in the event that something were to happen in the future, they can come back and find out if it may have had something to do with their employment. Restricting and closing roads, make sure you understand what your responsibilities are, what you can do and what you can't do. Restricting roads, you can close roads temporarily to install a pipe, or to, maybe for a paving project or a grinding project. Closing a road long term, if you're a town guy, it's not, you cannot do that. It could be closed by law enforcement, but the one that really and truly has to close it is the supervisor. I know for a fact we had a couple of events the year before I retired, and we had a number of roads that had to be closed, and I quickly called the supervisor and said, these are the things that have to be done, and we took the appropriate action to do what we needed to do to minimize our risk. Make sure you understand what your responsibilities are. The Association of Town Red Book spells this out very clearly, and we'll talk about that a little bit further on. Liability and risk. I always considered it my number one job to make sure that the town minimized its liability for things that they were doing, trying to keep people safe, to keep people that work for me safe, and keep the residents and the commuters safe. And the idea is, if you do it right, you keep it as low as you can. Doesn't mean that there may not be things that happen, and they will, but if you are doing everything you can to minimize that liability and the risk of liability, you're going to be far better off because of it.
Hey, Marty,
What's that?
I got a couple of questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
One of them actually ties back to your right of way, and that is, what do you do about a fancy mailbox that's along the edge of the roadway that's probably a safety hazard?
Well, fancy mailboxes that are in the right of way are really and truly there for the purpose of delivering mail. You really don't have a responsibility to that mailbox. Can they put it there? Well, they can put it there, but if something happens to it while it's there, it pretty much is going to be on the owner of the mailbox. And if somebody gets hurt because of, if they were to run into that mailbox, I don't know. I think I would make them aware that what they've done is not necessarily safe, and document that. Make sure you keep records of that, and that may at some point have some play in it. If you have a deeded right of way, obviously you have a certain responsibility. If it's a highway by use, well, I would probably think that you're probably going to share some of that responsibility, but if you make the owners aware, and I would make them aware in writing, and make sure that they understand, and maybe they aren't quite aware of what they've done. It's possible that they don't, because we've seen the videos at highway school in the past of what happens when you hit a mailbox at speed. It can be devastating, absolutely. So yeah, if it's something that you have real concerns about, make the owners aware of what it is, and I would, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit later on as we go on about mailbox and who's the responsibility of those. What was the other one, David?
The other one is somebody that puts in fencing every 2 to 3 feet right off the edge of the road. It's obviously a safety issue.
Mhm.
probably in the right of way.
Mhm.
Is there a procedure to get them to take those posts down?
Well, obviously, you have to make them aware of what they've done is they've infringed in your right of way, and I would assume that you had been maintaining that right of way prior to them putting the fence there. I would have to assume that you had been, whether it be mowing doesn't really count, but maintaining the ditch line, and if there was a ditch line, maintaining the ditch line. If there wasn't a ditch line there, to make sure that you have been maintaining it either side of where they put the fence up. You know, maybe the property owner next to them and the property owner on the other side. So if you had been maintaining that all along, and then they just put this up, say at the edge of their yard, to maybe keep people from driving on it and that sort of thing, well, then they certainly don't have any authority to do that. You have to make them aware that what they've done, and then, like, again, make sure you do it in writing, and make sure you document all that stuff. And I would think that at some point, if they refuse to do it, then I would take the appropriate action to, eliminate the issue. What are your thoughts, David? Would you probably would take it down,
Yep,
right?
you would
It
take it
can't.
down, and
Yeah, if they.
actually make sure you notify their insurance carrier as well.
Another good point. Absolutely, they certainly aren't going to want to have their insurance canceled. And as the same thing with trees, if you get a tree that's in the right of way that they absolutely insist that they're not going to let you take down, if it's starting to die and pieces are falling off in the road, might hit a car, make sure that you notify their insurance, and you can find out who their insurance carrier is, I'm sure. And at some
And
point they will put enough pressure on them that they'll succumb to what you're. And if it's something that's a blatant hazard, I would notify them, do the appropriate notifications, document it, and remove it. If it's a problem, if it's going to cause a problem, or if it has caused a problem already, just remove it. I see these people that are putting fences up that are right on the at an intersection, so that you can't see what's coming. I mean, we had one in our town did the same thing, planted a row of trees so it wasn't. So I said, I'm sure you weren't aware that what you did was causing a problem. Get those trees out of there. You need to move them back so that once they grow to appropriate size, people will still be able to see. And they said, I never gave it a thought. And as long as you're decent about it, most people are okay with it. Some won't be, and they're the ones that are going to be that you'll have to take those steps necessary to minimize your risk and liability.
when you get to the red book, we'll bring that back up. There's some
We
good
will.
things you can do there. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. So annual reports, there are a number of them that you're going to that you're required by law. The red book will spell a lot of that out for you. Your CHIPS report, so that you're going to get reimbursed by the state of New York for funds that you've expended to improve your right of way. Your machinery inventory. Normally every September you fill out a machinery inventory that the county provided us with ours. You fill it out, you do an inventory of all the machinery you have, the condition it's in, what you expect to spend to keep it viable, and on that same thing, you may have machinery that you've deleted from your inventory for whatever reason. Maybe it's past its point of usefulness, or maybe it's something that's been replaced. And they normally give you a slot in there of things that you tend to think that you may need to purchase in the future, that year or maybe in future years. It's a good idea. Anytime that you can do planning, and when I was looking back through your responsibilities, I didn't see planning on there. Planning is probably one of the toughest things, but the most important things that you're going to do. You don't know where you're going if you don't know how to get there. And planning is, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well, but planning is probably the thing that will make you most successful. If you know where you're going, it'll be a lot easier to get there. Hmm. My screen is locked up here. Okay. Well, so fleet inventory. We've talked a little bit about things that you're responsible for. Your fleet inventory, being the town is the town, and not necessarily just the town. On the county level, it's probably not as big a part of the budget, but it's still a very significant part of the budget. And to most towns, the highway budget is the lion's share of the money that's spent. Or the more urban a town gets, the lesser part it plays in it, but it's still a very big part of it. Take care of your stuff. Make sure that you keep it as good as you can, because things are not getting any cheaper or more available. As the last couple of years, and especially the last year, have shown that things aren't as easy to get as they once were. You know, it's not as easy to get the equipment to begin with, and it's certainly not as easy to get the parts to maintain them. So the better job you do taking care of them, the longer they're going to last. My grandfather always said, if grease is a whole lot cheaper than parts, and he was a smart man. You know, I mean, take care of your stuff. Do the services, do the maintenance that's required to keep them so that they're viable and useful. They're not cheap to replace, as we all know. They get more and more expensive all the time. And do they last longer? I don't know. Most things in the environment we use them in have a shelf life. They really do have a shelf life, but if you do the best you can to wash them and service them, they'll last longer. And make sure that you try to keep them under cover. Things that are stored inside tend to last longer. They do. The sun doesn't fade the paint. It doesn't work on the tires as much. It's something that if you have the ability to get things under cover, put them under cover. I know most of the housing for those things isn't a town superintendent's responsibility. It's a supervisor's responsibility. It comes out of their general budget. But make sure you make the people that hold the purse strings aware of just how important housing is for your equipment. If you don't have housing for it all, try to get it. It's a very important part of what you do. Scheduling work. Determine the work you need to do. You plan the activities that are required to get that work done. You have to calculate the cost. This is an important part of it, because you're working within a budget. The budget doesn't get bigger just because you spend more. So make sure that you understand of what your costs are going to be for whatever these projects are that you're going to do. You're going to implement it. You're going to get your feet on the ground and get the work done. And don't be like these folks here. Wait till you get all done and realize that they can't get the truck back out. So when you schedule your work, you're going to plan your activities. And there it is. The very first thing you're going to do is the planning part of it. You're going to mobilize your equipment. You're going to do whatever it is you plan on doing. And this is one of the things that I really stress. If you're going to do a project, make sure you finish the thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many places I've been. They put in a culvert. You know, they get the culvert in, and then the culvert lays along the edge of the road, or they don't finish the project off. They don't seed the area. It just, sometimes things are what they appear to be, and sometimes it's not. I mean, sometimes you just really have to make sure you finish whatever you're doing. And evaluate what you did. I mean, is there a way that I could have done this better? Is there a way that I could have been more efficient? Is there a way I could have done this and cut my costs? Those are all part of the work scheduling and how you go about achieving your goal of doing the very best you can with what you have to work with. What you're doing you might be cleaning ditches. There's a lot of things that are there more efficient ways to clean a ditch? How are you going to do this? When you go to schedule this, how are you going to do this? Where are you going to dump the spoils that are from this? And when you get done, are we going to seed this down to minimize the erosion so that it doesn't cut this new ditch all the way down through there and dump all the stuff at the bottom that you have to clean it again? Make sure that you take the time to think this through. I mean, we carried a bag of grass seed in both dump trucks when we were cleaning ditches, and a broadcast seeder. They would set the bag of grass seed down, and when the guy that was waiting to get his truck loaded again, he'd grab the seeder and he'd walk up the ditch and spread it on there. Everything was still probably very damp. In 10 days there'll be grass growing there. Do the things that, and grass seed, I'm telling you, is way cheaper than mobilizing that equipment out there to clean that ditch again. Make sure that you take the time to do whatever you're doing and do it the best you can. But think about those things before you even start the projects. Planning is key to a successful outcome. Some folks that are putting in a nice chip seal here. There's a lot that goes to this. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. The roller, the trucks that are required to to haul the material. Who's going to do that? Are you going to do that, or is it a turnkey thing? Is it in most towns? It's something that they don't have enough trucks to do it themselves, so they coordinate their activities with their neighbors, their partners. Intermunicipal cooperation is the key to most of this, because you can't afford to have all of the equipment to do everything you need all the time. I would suggest that you have an intermunicipal agreement with your neighbors. I don't know that it's a state blanket thing now. I don't know. There was talk one time that there was going to be a statewide 5G agreement. Is that such a thing, David? Did you ever hear if that ever came to pass?
Last I've heard, it is not, but it is something I think still in discussion.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you don't, and you cooperate with some of your neighbors, some of your neighboring towns or villages or the county, put an agreement into place. Our agreement in Schuyler County was a page and a half long. But it protects you in the event that, well, I'll tell you where it really played in for us. There were a couple of flooding declarations in our town that were FEMA declared and SEMA declared. We helped our neighboring towns, and we got reimbursement for the time we spent doing that. Without a intermunicipal agreement, that wouldn't have happened. We couldn't have gotten reimbursed for that time. So
if you want to get reimbursed federal or state dollars, you have to have an agreement in writing. So
right. So if you don't have one, put one together. I mean, I'm sure you have them at the local roads, right, David? There must be a sort of a one there, and if you don't have one, reach out to them. I'll make sure that we can send you ours. You can tailor it to however complicated or however simple you want it to be. Ours was simple, but it was all it was required as far as FEMA was concerned for us to get reimbursed. So make sure you take the time to think about that. Paving projects, there's a number of things that you're responsible for. These are I mean, you may not have as many paved miles in your town, you may have a lot more untreated roads, but all of these things are all a part of what you do. Your responsibilities are to make sure that you maintain that right of way, as we talked about with the mailboxes and that sort of thing. Maintain your right of way. Make sure that the people that are living along your road understand where your right of way is. Make sure that they're not putting up these elaborate things and without the idea that there may be some consequences to doing that kind of thing. So asset management. And this could be almost anything. I mean, we talk about, this is David's catchphrase, it's the right treatment, the right place at the right time. It could be a chip seal, it could be a pavement, but it could be something as simple as plowing snow. As time goes on, I mean, it's not just a matter of throwing sand and throwing salt like we used to. I mean, there's exotics, there are all kinds of de-icing agents that they're putting into place. Like today, in my house, there was no temperature. It was 0 here. Salt doesn't work at 0. It does not work at it. And if we'd have had enough snow here that they'd had to treat it, it would have been of very little function. Although it's not quite as cold or not quite as slippery when it's cold, it doesn't function as well when it's cold. But the exotics that are available now, the calciums and the mags and those sort of things, will let salt work at a much lower temperature. So the right treatment at the right place at the right time are things that, if you're just starting out, you'll learn some of these things. If you've been at it a while, some things can make your life a little better. I mean, even if you've been at this 15 years, yeah, sometimes adding some mag to your premix or to your mix may be the thing to do, or some calcium. It may help you maintain that right away in a more efficient way. So here's another poll. Do you have a winter maintenance policy or snow or ice control policy? Well, it says 100% of you do. 86% of you do. For those of you guys that are in that 10% or 9% category that don't have one, I'm saying get one. You really need to have something in writing. You don't need to have a judge or a jury decide what your maintenance policy is going to be. You know, they'll say, well, we always do this and we always do that. Well, it says, is it written down? Well, no, it's not written down, but we always do that. It won't hold up for a minute. If you don't have a snow or a winter maintenance policy or an ice and control policy, get one. Go to the local roads program. They have cookie cutter ones. If they don't have one that suits you, ours was, you know, a few pages long. We scavenged ours from the town of Orangetown, town and near the city. I tailored it. You know, shout out to Jim Dean for that. We tailored ours to suit our needs. We changed the names to protect the innocent. So, and make sure you leave yourself an out. You know, if the last couple of years have shown us nothing, things change. You know, maybe I'd say, well, we go out at 3 o'clock and we plow snow after there's an inch or after there's 2 inches or what it is, but if you don't have people in place for one reason or another, say, make sure that you leave yourself out, with the exception of, you know, employee availability, of product availability, of ice storms or something that you can't necessarily make your 2-hour rotation or 2.5-hour circuit or 4-hour circuit, whatever your town or your county does. You know, things may make a difference. So if you're in that B or you're D, you're not sure if you have to, or you have to check, or you know you don't have one, get one. You know, check. If you don't have it, get one. If you don't have one, get one in place. If you need, you know, when I do my workshops, anybody that wants it, I'll send it to them. I have it on my laptop so that anybody can have it. And if it's one you'd like to look at, let the local roads program know. And in fact, I'll send it to them, and then they could forward it on to you.
Well, Marty, in the chat pod, I put a link to our page of policies. So it has shared service agreements, some sample winter maintenance policies, even some mailbox damage policies that people can use and start with.
So there you go. Look at that, how efficient that is. You don't even have to reach out to them. It's already there. Thank you, David. Snow and ice control. You know, it's part of your responsibility. I feel bad for the guys that are out there doing that today. It's one of those things that you work really, really hard for, and in 4 months you have no idea what you spent your money on, and you will probably, if you're in the right part of the state, you'll spend a lot of it. I said, Pat Mahart from the town of Denmark had a truck that was going to a neighboring town today. I saw he posted on Facebook that they had a truck going to a neighboring town to help them. And that's what it is. I mean, you do what you do to make everyone safe, whether it's in your town or wherever it is. I mean, that's what intermunicipal agreements and cooperation is all about. Long before it was a buzzword, you know, that cooperation, that co-op. We were doing it for a long time. We were doing it when I first started at the town. The towns and the counties, all the towns were working together. I mean, that was 45 years ago. The last few years it's been a buzzword, but we were doing it long before it was a popular term. I got to be perfectly honest with you. I don't miss the snow and ice. It was, it was. I actually can sleep past 3 o'clock in the morning. It only took a few years, but I got to the point where I could sleep past 3 o'clock in the wintertime. So once this winter maintenance cycle is over with, there'll be the pothole season, and there's a lot to it. But make sure that while you're doing your road checks in the spring, and you can do it now. But I mean, when you're doing your road checks, weekly, make sure that you pay attention to those kind of things and address them as they need to. I mean, potholes are unsightly, they're aggravating, but they also cause damage to the people that are traveling on the road. So do what you can to get those corrected, and do them the best you can. Don't just throw it. Make sure when you put it in the holes, you take time to roll over it with your vehicle. It'll stay much better. I'm not going to say that it'll be perfect, but it'll stay much longer than it would be if you just threw it and left it. Throw and go is not nearly as successful as you take that extra step to try to compact it. And once the plowing and the potholes and all that are taken care of, the spring will be the road and street sweeping. We used to try to get on this as soon as we could, mostly because there are a lot of people that ride on two wheels now, and sand on the road or debris on the road from winter maintenance is it's not a good thing for people that are driving motorcycles. And as time goes on, people are going to be utilizing these kind of things more and more. It doesn't take much to go down on a motorcycle or even a bicycle if you run into that kind of debris on the road. So minimize your liability. Make sure that you do what you can. You don't want to end up in court or in small claims court over something like this. Make sure you take the time to do it right. And after you get it done, make sure you document it. So if people are putting things on the road after you've taken the time to sweep them off, make sure that you document when all this stuff is done. Record keeping is imperative. So vegetation management, it's a big part of. It was a big priority in our town. We really worked hard to keep the vegetation down. We live in an area where there's an awful lot of white-tailed deer and that sort of thing that try to make their way into the road. And if you can see them sooner, there's a chance that you could avoid them better. We as a town, I think they still are, we were agency certified, and we had certified applicators for pesticides. We put herbicides down to aid in the areas where we couldn't mow, where it wasn't feasible, around mailboxes and that sort of thing. There were a lot of people that do it, and there probably still are a lot of people that do it that aren't really supposed to be, that aren't doing it legally. So if you're doing it now, I suggest you really stop and take the time to do it right. DEC has a number of classes every year, or at least they have in the past, and you might even be able to do it online now. I don't know with the whole pandemic thing. You might be able to do that. I'm not sure, but get the agency certified and get if it's something that you're interested in doing, make sure you do it correctly. You don't need to open up that can of worms with DEC. I remember at highway school one year, there was somebody from DEC that was putting on a presentation, and one of the guys in the audience took his phone and called someone in his department and said, "Stop spraying right now." Well, apparently and DEC wields an awful lot of power, so you don't need to get yourself into that kind of a situation. But if it's something that you want to do, just do it right. Keep your roadsides mowed. I always, one of the old guys that lived in the town says, it isn't always what it is, it's what it appears to be. So maybe the road isn't the smoothest, and maybe it isn't quite as good as it could be, or maybe as good as you'd like it to be. But if the roadsides are mowed and it looks good, and the lines are painted on them, a lot of times they don't realize just how much better things could be because they think they're probably as good as they're going to get. So take the time to keep your roadsides mowed. It doesn't necessarily denote your right of way, but it might be one more little crutch. If you keep it mowed down, the trees won't grow, and if the trees don't grow, then there's no one can say that you're not maintaining it. If a tree grows within 6 inches of the road and you let it grow there for 10 years, you're pretty much saying that this isn't my right of way anymore. So make sure you take the time to maintain what you have, and that a big part of that is through vegetation. You're responsible for semi-annual sign inspections. I would hope that you're doing this. Signs are one of the greatest liability in the town. Things that aren't put up right. It's an easy peasy for the 1-800 call me lawyers. You've seen them. You see the commercials on televisions all the time. There's always somebody, and unfortunate as it is, as time goes on, more and more people are looking for a way to get something for a little or nothing. So make sure you take the time to do the sign inspection. Make sure you document the sign inspections. Make sure that, we signed the back of every sign and the date that the inspection was done. Make sure you do that. That way I'm not saying that it will be a perfect out in the event of a lawsuit, but it will give you a leg to stand on. Make sure that all that stuff is documented, especially your sign inspections. Make sure that they're documented. Semi-annual bridge inspections, spring and fall every year. It isn't necessarily a bridge, might not necessarily be a bridge, but anything with a structure over a 5-foot span is considered a bridge by definition. So if you've got large diameter culverts, make sure that you're checking those every spring, after the winter, especially after the runoff. And I don't know in your area if there's a lot of logging that goes on. There's a lot of things that happen as a result of forestry management, logging operations. They're not supposed to, by law, drop things into creeks, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So if it ends up in the creek and it washes down and it plugs up those structures and you don't realize it because you're not doing your inspections as you should. When it says semi-annual, every time there's a high water event, make sure you just go check after that, because it could be things that didn't go over that time, but the very next event, it may go over. I know this all too well because of things that have happened in the town. I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute too. Make sure that you document this stuff. Make sure that you make your town board aware that you've made those sign inspections. And every month I did a report to the town and put it in as my report that went into official records of things that were done that month. And this was always one of them. The bridge inspections, the sign inspections were always put into official records. So do you have an emergency response plan? I'm glad to see 100% say they do. It's required that you have one.
Maybe what we should ask is when's the last time they actually updated it?
It should be looked at every year. I mean, that's just a part of having a good response plan, is how often is it updated? How often do you look at it to see if things need to be changed in there? And if the last couple of years have told us anything, there's a lot of things that should be looked at as a result of that. Take the time, look and see. You may not have had any play in it. I mean, if you're new to this, you have no idea what your emergency response plan is, and you don't know what your part is in that response plan. You could have a very big part in it you don't even know you're responsible for. So take the time, look at it, see what it says, and then if necessary, go in front of the board and do what you need to do to tailor it to fit what you think is required.
Hey, there's a follow-up question on that, Marty.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about sharing that emergency plan with the rest of the crew?
Well, absolutely. The crew should know exactly what your responsibility as a superintendent, I mean, if that's who's asking the question, but the crew should absolutely be aware of who's responsible for what. The more you keep your crew involved in what you do, the better off you're going to be. Make your guys smart, make them aware, make them as bright as you can get them. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about retaining people. Make sure that they understand what their roles are going to be in any kind of an emergency situation. And there will be emergency situations. I'm not telling you maybe if it happens, I'm just telling you when it happens, because it is going to happen. It's just a part of what we do. It's part of the climate that we live in, regardless of what your thoughts are with climate change and all that. I'm just telling you that the odds are that at some point it's going to come around to you. We had, and I will talk about this too, we had 2 500-year events in 8 days, flooding events in 8 days. I mean, it's been 7 years since that happened, so they've only got 993 more years before it happens again. I don't think that's the case. So be aware of what your responsibilities are and what you're going to do when those emergencies happen. Yeah, emergencies are part of it. This is what's, it's the unfortunate part, the things that you don't want. You don't want to have to deal with it. But the more prepared you are for it, having the plan in place, will it make it easier? It's not going to make it easier. It's kind of one of those things that lets the air out of your sails in a hurry. I mean, things that I had worked for 38 years at the town were gone in an hour. It's disheartening. It's troubling, you know, and it kind of is one of those things that can kind of make you or break you. It didn't signal the end for me, but it kind of made me think, well, you know what? I don't know really why I'm beating my head against the wall for this. You just have to be resilient. You know, if it hadn't been for the neighboring towns, I shout out to Matt Mustico in Chemung County, and if it hadn't been for the help that I got after that, I don't know where we'd have been. This happened in July, and by fall, everything was put back together, and we didn't have to float a bond. We didn't have to do anything. It was a lot of help from a lot of friends that helped us get through it. So make sure that you have that network, that people that you can fall on. Hopefully, with us, it was a very localized, those flooding events were very localized. So the towns in our county and, you know, the neighboring towns in the county that I had those relationships with said, what can we do to help? You know, it's one of those things that you need to be prepared for as best you can. But when it comes right down to it, there's going to be a lot on you. There will be a lot on your departments. There will be a lot of overtime. There will be a lot of time spent away from your families trying to correct the things that go wrong. But at the end of the day, if you're prepared and you have the right plans in place, and you get the right help, you'll get through it. You know, it's just part of it. You will get through it. So training. I talked before about training, keeping your guys smart, keeping them in the loop. Train them. Get them smart. Get them as smart as you can get them. Somebody said, well, yeah, get them all smart and then they'll go somewhere else. Yeah, well, what if you don't train them, if you don't make them smart and they stay there? Is that a good thing? Make your people as good at what they do as you can get them. I mean, what do you do about employee recruitment and retention? I mean, now more than ever. Uh, I was at Dunkin' Donuts the other day, and there was a sign in the window that said, "Looking for staff, $16.40 an hour to pour coffee." I I don't know where we're going with this. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that people don't deserve, to get paid for what they do, but when I look at them getting $16.40 an hour, and the guys that are driving 70,000-pound trucks are getting $19 an hour. I don't really see the correlation there. I mean, their responsibilities are so much greater. And how do you get people to start with, and how do you keep them there? I get it that there's going to be some benefits that go along with what you do as opposed to working at Dunkin' Donuts, but how do you do that? I mean, how do you recruit those new employees? Type that into the your box, and maybe you can give me some ideas about how you're going to keep those people there. Obviously, it's referrals is good. I mean, the last people that I hired, I actually had to put an ad in the paper. I mean, I had never had to do that. There was always somebody in the town that you could see that was coming off the farm, or was knew how to work, knew how to run equipment. Not so much anymore. It's not as easy. The people have moved away from the farms, and they were partly trained before they got there. Word of mouth. I see that. That's it maybe I we don't see this generation, and at least I don't see this generation um, taking those kind of things. I don't know that the BOCES are training people as well as they should have. I know there for a while the Alfred Ag and Tech had a program going on. I don't know, if they're still doing that.
They're still doing that.
Yeah, I mean, we need to have people trained, at least partially trained, to jump in there. Benefits, yeah, I know benefits and pay. You have to pay more, but what does that do to the town and the county and the city and village budgets? I mean, are they just jumping on that bandwagon to give them more money? I mean, back in the day when I was superintendent, it was a fight every year to make sure that I got my guys as much as I could get for them. I guess. I mean, I guess that they won't have any choice in the matter. Maybe you're going to probably get, if it means paying them more money, then they're going to have a smaller staff, because obviously they're not going to be just jumping their budgets crazily and adding to the expense of being they're not going to want to raise taxes, because that's not necessarily the way that they get reelected to their position. So, yeah, the more you can do to keep them there, the guys you've got, treat them well, treat your guys well, make sure they know that you appreciate them. Cost you zero at the end of the day to tell them that they're doing a good job. You stayed safe out there. I stop every night. I leave my office. I go over there. I say, boy, I saw what you did today. You did a great job. Guys stayed safe. Nobody got hurt. Cost you zero. And at the end of the day, it may be the one thing that keeps those people there. We talked a little bit about the Red Book earlier. You probably have a copy of this in your office. If you don't, it's available through the Association of Towns. Read it. If you're a town guy, town highway superintendent, read this book. It is the Bible. The year I was president of the New York State Town Highway Association, I fielded questions weekly, in regards to the things that were in this book and what was my opinion, what did I think. Well, I'm not a lawyer, but a lot of these things are spelled out very clearly in this book as to what your responsibilities are. This is the updated manual. You may have an older one in your office. I think the association towns sent them out to everyone, right, David? When the new book came out,
they had it available.
Yeah, I don't know. I know at one point I thought that they were going to send it out to everyone that was a member of the association, but I'm not sure. But it's available. I don't know if there's a cost to it. There probably might be, but if you don't have it, get it and take the time to read it. And everybody will give me the lip service. Well, I've read it. Well, read the book. You know, it's not a ton of pages, and there'll be a time when instead of watching some rerun on Netflix, read the book. You can do it in a night or do it in 2 nights easily. So take the time to read it. Make sure you understand what your responsibilities are. You know, we talked about the 284 agreement. You know, you do realize, of course, that you can't spend a nickel without having an agreement, a signed agreement in place. We used to do ours the very first board meeting. You know, I fill it out, and then the good thing about it is you're not held to it. If you want to decide that you want to change something in your 284 agreement, you can just amend it. You make an amended agreement. The year we had the 2 500-year flooding events in 1 week, we amended it 7 times that year. It's a part of how you do business. And if you're not, I know guys that have never filled one out, and then they've been doing what they do illegally for years. Make sure you take the time to do your 284 agreement. If you're new to the job and you haven't picked a deputy superintendent for your position, make sure you do. It's important. It's the guy that's going to take over if things go badly for you, or if you need to go on a vacation. Somebody's going to do your job while you're gone. Probably it'll be somebody in your department, but it doesn't have to be. You know, maybe you pick your wife to do it. I don't know. The only thing is, if they're not in the department, then the town, I'm not sure what their responsibility would be to make some sort of compensation for what they're doing. So make sure that you read this book. It's the most important thing probably in your office. So I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time out of your day today to share this hour with me. I hope that I've made some sort of made you at least think about some of the things. I'm going to be teaching workshops 6 times, I think, in the spring. Some of them are going to maybe close to where you are. If it's something that they're much more detailed, they're more hands-on. They'll make you better at what you do, and not just mine. The Colonial Local Roads program is a resource that you should be taking advantage of. You know, I took enough of them that I got the Roadmasters, multiple Roadmasters, and it's a good thing for you to be smarter. Smarter is better, right, David? Well, so there's
two quick Q&A questions for you there, Marty.
Okay.
Who's responsible for labor law posters and all those things, notifications?
You're responsible to have them up. They have to be on the wall. They have to be posted. Absolutely, they have to be. You know, it is a write-up. If Pesh comes into your shop and doesn't see him there, you're going to get written up for it, without a doubt.
And then the other one, there was a comment about the new CDL requirements. The new CDL requirements that have changed literally as of now. There's new training requirements and new things are going to have to be done. That's going to require some training of your employees to make them smart, as you said, and to help keep and retain them. So just something to be aware of for those who are on the call today. We do actually have a webinar coming up on February talking about retaining employees, and hopefully we'll give you some more ideas on that one too. So,
well, that being said, David, thanks for your input in this, and thanks everybody for taking the time out of their day, and thanks for doing what you do. Not nearly enough people take the time out of their day to thank you for what you do. It can sometimes be a thankless job, as I know a lot of times, but if people aren't complaining about what you do, you got to kind of consider that you're doing a good job. I mean, I always figured if they aren't saying anything bad, then maybe they're thinking good thoughts. So thanks for doing what you do. I appreciate what you do, and I'll be here as a resource whenever I can to help you do what you do better. So thanks very much.
Thanks, folks. Everybody have a great day. Stay warm.
Stay safe.